But a lot of my research recently has been in between the 1500s and the 1800s, because predominantly, with written history and the more solidified facts are around the 18th century. And I really want to put a lot into the early 16th century, which is where I keep finding this one myth. I think it's early 16th century. It could be, obviously anywhere between the late 1500s and the 1800s. But for the Choctaw people, it's the myth of the two hunters and the unknown woman. I've seen, like, at this point, at least 9 different variations. They're all relatively similar. Some of them have a little more detail. Some of them are really short. But it's a myth that I love a lot, and I really want to work with it in many ways. If we ever actually have the opportunity to put it on screen, it would be for a while, because we wouldn't see this time period in the film Scales, which is where we introduce Wendy, our Choctaw character. But the hunters and the unknown woman, or the two hunters and the woman in some of the myths, goes something like this. Once two hunters had tried for 2 days to catch something to bring back to their families, with no success. They were now at the end of the second day, and the only thing to show for their efforts was one black hawk, which they had shot earlier in the day. The hawk certainly was not enough to bring home to feed their families. It wasn't even enough, really, for the two of them, but they plucked it and set it over a fire to cook anyway, since they had no other food and they were very hungry after a long day's work. The two men sat next to the fire, waiting for their dinner to be ready, and they did not speak to one another, but rather sat lost in their sad thoughts and feeling sad about their lack of success. And just as the full moon began to rise, they heard a low, plaintive sound. "What was that?" the first hunter asked. "Sounded like a dove of some kind," the second replied. "Maybe." They sat by the fire a little longer as the moon rose into the sky. When the moon was high enough in the sky to cover everything in silvery light, the sound happened again, except this time it was much louder and closer. "Did you hear that? It was that sound again," the first hunter said. "It's getting closer. I think we ought to go and see what it is." The second hunter agreed. They went to the nearby riverbank, but did not see anything along it or across it. However, when they turned around to go back to their camp, a young woman was standing on a small mound before them. She was dressed in all in white clothing, very beautiful. "Do you have anything to eat?" the woman asked the hunters. "I am very hungry indeed." "We do not have much," the second hunter said, "but what we have you are welcome to share." The hunters brought the roasted hawk over to the mound and gave it to the woman. She ate some of it and gave the rest back to the hunters. "Thank you," she said. "I was nearly dead of hunger, but you saved me. I will never forget your kindness. 1 month from now, return to the spot, and you will find a gift waiting for you." Then the woman vanished, her form dissipating into the breeze. In the morning, the hunters returned to their village, still sadly empty-handed. They did not tell anyone about the woman they had met, because they knew she was very important and powerful being, the daughter of the Great Spirit. The days passed, and the hunters returned to the mound on the day the woman had told them to be there. They waited and waited, but the woman did not appear. Soon it was nightfall, and the full moon was rising over the river, just as it's done on the day they had met the woman. "I don't think she's coming," the first hunter said. "She promised, though," the second hunter said. "Maybe we are waiting in the wrong place. Maybe we're supposed to be waiting on the mound where we first saw her." The hunters then went to the mound, and when they got to the top, they saw that it was covered with many tall plants. The leaves were long and flat and growing on stalks, where the long pods with silky tassels peeking out the ends. "What do we do with this?" the first hunter said. Maybe it's something to eat. We gave her food when she was hungry, so maybe she's repaying us in kind. The second hunter picked one of the long pods and stripped away the leafy outer covering. He pulled off the strands of silk that lay along the rows between the kernels and took a bite. "Oh, this is very good," he said. "We must bring this back to the people. We can plant this, and then we will always have food right there in our village. We will never be hungry again." The two hunters gathered as much corn as possible and brought it in back to their village. They told the people how they had come by it. The people were all astonished and rejoiced that such a precious gift should have been given to them. And this is how the Choctaws first got corn.